From rock bottom to happily ever after. How one act of kindness changed my life. I never thought a simple act of kindness on a rainy Tuesday night would completely transform my life, but here I am 3 years later, living a reality I couldn't have imagined in my wildest dreams. I've debated sharing this story for months, but with everything that's happened, I feel like it might inspire someone else going through hard times. So buckle up, Reddit, because this is going to be a long one. The night everything changed. I was 28, working as a marketing coordinator for a tech startup in Boston. The company was one of those work hard, play hard environments that really just meant sacrifice your entire life for mediocre pay and free snacks. I'd been there for 2 years, constantly passed over for promotions despite consistently exceeding my targets. My one-bedroom apartment was eating half my monthly income. My student loans were crushing me, and I was living paycheck to paycheck despite having a degree from a good university. That particular Tuesday in October was especially brutal. Our CMO had taken credit for my campaign idea during the quarterly review. My car had failed inspection that morning, with repairs I couldn't afford. And to top it off, my boyfriend of 3 years had called during lunch to break up with me. Over text. Because he'd reconnected with his ex while on a business trip to Chicago. For the past 3 months. Classic. It was pouring rain as I left the office at 9 p.m., having stayed late to finish a presentation for the next day. I remember standing in the parking lot, letting the rain soak me for a minute, too emotionally exhausted to even care. I just wanted to get home, open a bottle of wine, and cry myself to sleep. I stopped at a 24-hour grocery store on the way home to get that promised bottle of wine and some ice cream. The universal breakup survival kit. As I was walking back to my car, shopping bag in hand, I noticed a man sitting against the wall near the entrance. He was maybe in his mid-30s, soaking wet, with a small backpack beside him. What caught my attention was that he wasn't panhandling or asking for anything. He was just sitting there, staring at the ground, completely drenched. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was that I recognized the look of someone at their breaking point. I approached him and asked if he was okay. Just having a rough patch, he said with a slight southern accent. Lost my wallet yesterday, and my phone died. Been trying to figure out my next move. Something in his eyes struck me, a kind of dignity mixed with desperation. He wasn't asking for help, but it was clear he needed it. I'd volunteered at shelters before and knew the homeless population in our city well enough to recognize that this guy wasn't a regular on the streets. His clothes, though wet, were good quality, and his haircut was recent. When's the last time you ate something? I asked. Yesterday morning, he admitted reluctantly. I invited him to join me at the diner across the street, and after some hesitation, he accepted. His name was Michael, and over coffee and the biggest breakfast platter the diner offered, which he tried to decline until I insisted, his story came tumbling out. Michael had been a hotel manager in Nashville until 6 months ago, when the boutique hotel he ran was acquired by a large chain. New management had come in, laid off half the staff including him, and he'd struggled to find comparable work since. He'd depleted his savings, lost his apartment, and had been couch surfing with increasingly impatient friends. A promising job lead had brought him to Boston 3 days ago, but the interview had fallen through at the last minute. Then he'd lost his wallet, possibly pickpocket while on the subway. I've got a bus ticket back to Nashville for tomorrow afternoon, he said. Just need to survive until then and figure things out back home. As he spoke, I noticed he was shivering slightly, and on closer inspection, I saw a badly infected cut on his hand. How long has your hand been like that? I asked. He glanced at it dismissively. Few days. It's fine. It was clearly not fine. The area around it was red and swollen, with angry streaks starting to move up his wrist, the beginning of blood poisoning. My mom's a nurse, so I recognized the signs immediately. You need antibiotics, Michael. That's blood poisoning starting. He sighed. No insurance, no ID, no money. Not exactly in a position to hit up an emergency room. I made a decision then that, in retrospect, was either incredibly stupid or incredibly fortunate. I told him I was taking him to an urgent care clinic near my apartment. When he protested, I cut him off. Look, I've had the day from hell, my boyfriend just dumped me, my boss stole my ideas, and my car is basically falling apart. Just let me do something decent for another human being today. Okay? I need this. That made him laugh, and he finally agreed. The urgent care adventure. At the urgent care clinic, we ran into exactly the problems you'd expect. No ID, no insurance, no service. I ended up paying $200 out of pocket for him to be seen as a cash patient. The doctor confirmed my suspicions, early sepsis, and prescribed strong antibiotics. Another $75 at the pharmacy next door. While waiting for the prescription, we talked more. Michael had a business degree and had worked his way up in the hotel industry over 10 years. He'd managed 3 different properties and had excellent references, but the job market was tough, especially as hotels consolidated under bigger corporate umbrellas. The irony is I'm actually really good at what I do, he said. I turned around 2 struggling properties. But on paper, I'm just another laid-off middle manager. By the time we left the clinic, it was nearly midnight. The rain had stopped, but it was cold, and Michael was clearly exhausted. The antibiotics were strong, and he needed rest and a proper meal for them to work effectively. I made another impulsive decision. I have a couch, I said. It's not much, but it's dry and warm. You can crash there tonight. Get some real rest before your bus tomorrow. He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. I can't impose like that. You're not imposing if I'm offering. And I'm not going to sleep tonight wondering if you're back on that wet sidewalk getting sicker. I tried to joke. Besides, you look too tired to be a serial killer, and I know where you're getting on the bus tomorrow. Mutually assured destruction. That made him laugh again, and he finally agreed. An unexpected guest. I'll admit I had a moment of, what am I doing? As I unlocked my apartment door with a stranger following behind me. But something about Michael put me at ease. Perhaps it was how he carried himself, or the way he spoke. Articulate, respectful, and with that subtle confidence of someone who's used to being in charge but has temporarily lost their footing. My apartment was tiny and not particularly tidy, with laundry I hadn't put away and dirty dishes in the sink. I felt a flash of embarrassment as we entered, but Michael acted like he was entering a palace. This is great, he said sincerely. Thank you. I showed him the bathroom, gave him a clean towel, and found an old Boston University t-shirt and sweatpants my ex had left behind that looked like they might fit him. While he showered, I quickly tidied up, made up the couch with fresh sheets, and heated up some leftover pasta. When Michael emerged from the bathroom, he looked like a different person. Clean-shaven, hair-washed, and in dry clothes, you could really see the person beneath the circumstances. Handsome in a weathered way, with kind eyes and smile lines. We ate pasta at my tiny kitchen table, and despite the absurdity of the situation, the conversation flowed naturally. He told me about growing up in rural Tennessee, about his passion for hospitality and creating spaces that made people feel welcome. I shared stories about my marketing work, my frustrations with being undervalued, and my secret dream of starting my own agency someday. We talked until 2 a.m., like old friends catching up rather than strangers who'd met outside a grocery store hours earlier. Before turning in, I insisted on checking his hand. The antibiotics were already helping. The angry red streaks had stopped advancing. Thank you, Ellie, he said quietly. Not just for the medical help, but for seeing me as a person. You have no idea what that means. I slept surprisingly well that night, not at all concerned about the stranger on my couch. When I woke up the next morning, I found Michael had already been up for hours. He'd cleaned my entire kitchen, fixed the wobbly leg on my coffee table, and even made coffee. Least I could do, he said when I thanked him. I also took the liberty of looking at your car. That rattling sound you mentioned? Pretty sure it's just a loose heat shield. 20-minute fix at any garage. Shouldn't cost more than $50. We had breakfast together, and I drove him to the bus station. Before he boarded, I impulsively handed him an envelope with $300, nearly all the cash I had left until payday. I can't take this, he said, trying to hand it back. You can and you will, I insisted. Get back on your feet, then pay it forward someday. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. I will. I promise. We exchanged phone numbers. I made him program mine into his phone, which he'd managed to charge at my place. Then with a quick, somewhat awkward hug, he was gone. I watched his bus pull away feeling strangely bereft, like I'd said goodbye to an old friend rather than someone I'd known for less than 24 hours. Life goes on, but not very well. The weeks after Michael left were some of the most challenging of my career. My ex came by to collect his things and managed to make me feel like our breakup was somehow my fault. My boss continued taking credit for my work, and I was passed over, again, for a promotion that went to the CEO's nephew, a recent graduate who couldn't create a marketing plan to save his life. The final straw came just before Thanksgiving. After pulling 3 consecutive all-nighters to rescue a client presentation the nephew had botched, I was called into the CMO's office. Instead of the thanks I expected, I was reprimanded for overstepping and making other team members look bad. I quit on the spot. It was financially reckless and professionally risky, but walking out of that office, I felt nothing but relief. I had enough savings to last 2 months if I was careful, and I was determined to use that time to finally pursue my own path. I texted Michael that night to share my news, as we'd kept in loose contact since his departure. He'd made it back to Nashville, was staying with a friend, and had picked up some shift work at a hotel while looking for something permanent. He was the only person who didn't think I was crazy for quitting. "The way you helped me took courage," he texted back. "This does too. You're going to be fine. Better than fine." His confidence in me meant more than he knew. The unexpected email. A week after quitting, I was deep into planning my next steps. I decided to launch my own marketing consultancy, focusing on hospitality and tourism businesses, inspired in part by my conversations with Michael about the industry. I was working on my website and reaching out to my network when an email arrived from an address I didn't recognize. Marketing director position. Confidential opportunity. I almost deleted it, thinking it was spam, but something made me open it. It was from a recruitment firm representing a new boutique hotel group launching in Boston. They were looking for someone to head up their marketing efforts. The requirements aligned perfectly with my experience, and the salary mentioned was nearly double what I'd been making. I responded immediately, and within hours had a phone screening scheduled for the next day. The recruiter was enthusiastic about my background and particularly interested in my ideas about authentic, experience-based marketing for boutique properties. Exactly what I'd been discussing with Michael during our late-night conversation. 2 days later, I was invited for an in-person interview at the group's temporary office space. I spent hours preparing, researching the limited information available about this new hotel group, and putting together a preliminary marketing strategy. I wanted this job not just for the money, but because it aligned perfectly with my own values about creating meaningful experiences. The morning of the interview, I dressed in my best suit, rehearsed my talking points, and arrived 15 minutes early. The receptionist led me to a conference room with a view of the Boston Harbor and told me the CEO would be with me shortly. I was reviewing my notes one final time when the door opened. I stood up, professional smile in place, hand extended for a greeting, and froze. Michael stood in the doorway, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, looking nothing like the drenched, desperate man I'd met outside the grocery store. For a long, disorienting moment, I thought I was hallucinating. "Hello, Ellie," he said, his familiar southern accent now wrapped in newfound confidence. "It's good to see you again." I stammered something unintelligible as he closed the door behind him and took a seat across from me. "You're probably confused," he said gently. "I owe you an explanation." "Making a choice." I asked for a moment alone, which Michael immediately granted. In the quiet of that conference room, I tried to sort through my tangled emotions. Was I angry? A little. He could have told me the truth sooner. Was I embarrassed? Definitely. I kept thinking about my messy apartment, the laundry on the floor, the cheap wine. Was I suspicious of his motives? Initially, but his offer to recuse himself from my interview process seemed sincere. Most importantly, did I want this job? Absolutely. It was exactly the kind of role I dreamed of: creative freedom, proper compensation, and the chance to build something from the ground up. When Michael returned, I had questions. Many questions. About the company, the role, expectations, and yes, about his intentions. He answered everything directly, showing me business plans, investor decks, property renderings, and organizational charts. This was very real and very legitimate. As for the $300 I'd given him, he donated $3,000 in my name to a homeless shelter near the grocery store where we'd met. He showed me the receipt on his phone. "I wasn't trying to trick you that night," he said finally. "I was genuinely in a difficult situation, and you showed me extraordinary kindness without expecting anything in return. It reminded me why I got into hospitality in the first place, to create that same feeling for others. I took a deep breath and made my decision. I want the job, I said. But I want to earn it. I prepared a full presentation on my marketing vision for a boutique hotel brand. I'd like to present it to you and any other executives involved in the decision. Judge me on that, not on the fact that I once gave you my ex-boyfriend's sweatpants. Michael's face broke into a genuine smile. I think that can be arranged. The real interview. 2 days later, I presented my marketing strategy to Michael and 3 other executives, the COO, CFO, and Director of Operations. I was nervous but prepared, and I delivered what was probably the most passionate presentation of my career. I outlined a vision for experiential marketing that would position their hotels not just as places to stay, but as gateways to authentic local experiences. I talked about digital storytelling, user-generated content strategies, partnership opportunities with local artisans and businesses, and creating Instagram-worthy moments throughout their properties. When I finished, there was a moment of silence. Then the COO started applauding. The others joined in. They had questions, thoughtful, challenging ones, which I answered with confidence. By the end of the 2-hour meeting, I could tell they were impressed. Michael remained professional throughout, showing no favoritism. After the others left, he stayed behind. That was exceptional, he said. And I'm not just saying that because you once saved me from sepsis. I laughed, finally feeling the tension dissolve. So what happens now? Well, the team will discuss, but I can tell you they were impressed. Assuming everyone agrees, and I believe they will, we'd like to offer you the position of Marketing Director for Harrington House Hotels. The salary and benefits package will be as discussed with the recruiter, with an additional equity option we offer to all executive team members. He paused, then added more softly, but regardless of what you decide professionally, I'd like to thank you properly for your kindness. Would you consider having dinner with me sometime? Not as a potential boss, just as a person who'd like to get to know you better. I considered this for a moment. Let's finalize the job details first. If I accept the position, we should probably wait on dinner until I've established myself professionally. I don't want anyone thinking I got this job for any reason other than merit. He nodded, respecting my boundaries. That's fair. The offer will be ready tomorrow, and you can take as much time as you need to decide. I didn't need time. I accepted the offer the next day. Building something together. The next 6 months were a whirlwind of activity as we prepared for the first Harrington House Hotel opening. I assembled a marketing team, developed our brand voice, created our digital presence, and worked closely with every department to ensure a cohesive guest experience from online booking to checkout. Michael and I maintained a strictly professional relationship at work. He was an incredible boss, supportive, insightful, and trusting of my expertise. The more we worked together, the more I respected his business acumen and leadership style. Our flagship Boston property opened to rave reviews and reached 90% occupancy within the first month, unheard of for a new hotel. My marketing strategies were credited with much of this success, earning me recognition within the industry and complete trust from our investors. Once the hotel was successfully launched and my position was secure, Michael finally asked me to dinner again. This time I accepted. Away from the office, we rediscovered the easy connection we'd had that first night. Without the specter of homelessness or the hierarchies of work, we were just 2 people enjoying each other's company. Dinner turned into drinks, drinks turned into a waterfront walk, and before I knew it, we'd been talking for 6 hours. I never properly thanked you, he said as we stood overlooking the harbor. Not just for the medical help and the couch, but for seeing me as a person when I was at my lowest. That night changed me, Ellie. It reminded me why I started this company, to create spaces where people feel that same sense of belonging and care that you showed me. You've thanked me enough, I said. You gave me my dream job. You earned that job, he corrected. But you gave me something more valuable, perspective, and maybe a second chance at the kind of connection that matters more than business success. When he kissed me that night, it felt both surprising and inevitable, like the natural conclusion to a story that had been writing itself since that rainy evening outside the grocery store. Navigating complications. Dating your boss is complicated, especially when you're both building a new company. We kept our relationship private initially, both to avoid workplace gossip and to ensure my professional reputation remained intact. I'd worked too hard to be seen as the boss's girlfriend, rather than a competent executive in my own right. When we finally disclosed our relationship to the board and executive team 3 months later, we came prepared. Michael recused himself from decisions regarding my compensation and performance reviews, shifting those responsibilities to the COO. I maintained my independent reporting structure and made it clear to my team that all marketing decisions remained under my authority. There were whispers, of course. A few executives who had been with Michael longer made snide comments about how I'd fast-tracked my way into the C-suite. The head of sales once referred to me as the girlfriend in a meeting, only to be publicly corrected by the CFO, who pointed out that my marketing strategies had delivered twice the projected booking revenue in our first quarter. The most difficult moment came 6 months into our relationship when an industry blog published a thinly veiled blind item about a hospitality upstart whose marketing chief earned her position on her back rather than her merits. Michael was furious and wanted to respond publicly. I convinced him instead to let my work speak for itself. 2 weeks later, our innovative local experience packages were featured in Travel and Leisure, and my social media strategy won a hospitality marketing award. The blog quietly deleted their post. Through it all, Michael and I grew closer. We were partners in every sense, supporting each other, challenging each other, and building something meaningful together, both professionally and personally. Full circle. A year after our first meeting, Michael proposed. Not in a fancy restaurant or exotic location, but in the small diner where I'd first bought him breakfast. He'd arranged to rent out the entire place for the evening, recreating our first meal together, right down to the slightly burned toast and overbrewed coffee. "This is where you changed my life," he said, getting down on one knee beside the same booth we'd sat in that night. "Not because you helped me when I needed it, but because you showed me what really matters. I've built hotels all over the country, but you taught me the true meaning of hospitality. Seeing someone, caring for them without expectation, creating a space where they feel valued. I want to spend my life creating that feeling with you." I said yes before he even finished asking. We married 6 months later in a ceremony that reflected our unlikely beginning. Instead of gifts, we asked guests to contribute to a foundation we'd started to provide emergency assistance and job training for hospitality workers facing hardship. My parents, initially skeptical of our whirlwind romance, had become Michael's biggest fans, especially after witnessing how he supported my career growth even as our personal relationship deepened. Epilogue. 3 years later. Today, Harrington House Hotels has 6 locations across the country, with 4 more in development. We've been featured in every major travel publication for our innovative approach to authentic, locally rooted hospitality. Our staff turnover rate is the lowest in the industry because we prioritize living wages, advancement opportunities, and genuine care for our team members. Professionally, I've grown beyond what I ever imagined possible. My marketing department has won multiple industry awards, and I was recently named one of 40 under 40 hospitality executives to watch. I'm no longer just Michael's wife in the industry. He's often introduced as Ellie Thompson's husband at marketing conferences. Personally, life has expanded in beautiful ways too. Our twins Lily and James just turned 1. We've renovated a historic home near our flagship hotel, creating the warm, welcoming space we both dreamed of providing for others. Michael's parents have moved nearby to be close to their grandchildren, and my sister is now our company's sustainability director. Sometimes on rainy nights, Michael and I still talk about that first evening. How close we came to never meeting, how many small decisions led to our paths crossing. If I hadn't stayed late at work, if I hadn't stopped for wine, if I hadn't noticed him sitting there. If. It wasn't luck, Michael always says. It was who you are. You saw someone who needed help, and you helped. Everything else, our company, our marriage, our family, grew from that one genuine moment. I used to think success meant climbing corporate ladders and proving my worth through titles and salaries. Now I understand it differently. Success is creating value, for others, for yourself, for the world. It's building connections that matter and spaces where people feel seen. Sometimes I think about that broken-hearted girl standing in the rain outside her office, feeling invisible and undervalued. I wish I could tell her that in less than 3 years, she'd be running her own department, married to an amazing partner, mother to beautiful twins, and completely, utterly fulfilled. I wish I could tell her that her lowest moment was about to lead to her highest. But maybe that's the point of sharing this story now. Maybe somewhere out there, someone else is having their own rainy Tuesday, feeling overlooked and underappreciated. Maybe they'll read this and remember that life can change in an instant. Sometimes all it takes is the courage to see someone else's humanity, or to allow your own to be seen. So if you're in that place right now, hold on. Be kind when you can. See people. Let yourself be seen. You never know which seemingly small moment might be the beginning of your entire future. The end.